Thanksgiving was always my favorite holiday growing up. The aroma of roasted turkey, the cheerful chaos in our Portland home, and that warm feeling of family togetherness. My parents immigrated here before I was born, determined to give us the American dream. I worked hard to make them proud, building my tech startup from nothing into a multi-million-dollar success. I never imagined that at our family dinner, they would betray me so completely for my brother Darren, using my own money to fund his lavish lifestyle. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments, hit subscribe, and prepare for a story about family betrayal you will not believe. I grew up in a modest three-bedroom house in southeast Portland, where my parents settled after arriving from Cuba in the early 90s. They worked multiple jobs to provide for us, my father as a mechanic during the day, and security guard at night, my mother cleaning houses while taking community college classes. Their mantra was always clear: education was the path to success in America. From an early age, I felt the weight of their expectations. As the firstborn son, I was meant to embody their American dream. My brother Darren arrived 4 years after me, and something in our family dynamic shifted. Where I was expected to be responsible and serious, Darren was allowed to be carefree and spontaneous. When I brought home an A-, my father would ask why it was not an A+. When Darren brought home C's, they praised his creativity and free spirit. Despite this imbalance, I loved my family fiercely. I understood my parents had sacrificed everything for us to have opportunities they never had. I threw myself into my studies, graduating high school as valedictorian and earning a partial scholarship to Oregon State for computer science. College was a struggle financially. My scholarship covered tuition, but nothing else. I worked 2 part-time jobs, mornings at a coffee shop and evenings doing tech support. I lived on ramen and slept maybe 4 hours a night, determined to graduate without debt. Meanwhile, Darren dropped out of community college after 1 semester, and my parents paid for him to find himself through a series of expensive hobbies: music production equipment, 1 month photography gear the next. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a cybersecurity firm. I absorbed everything I could about network vulnerabilities and data protection. By 26, I had enough experience and connections to take a risk. I quit my job and founded SecureNode, a specialized security company focused on protecting small to medium businesses from emerging cyber threats. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked 18-hour days, living in a tiny studio apartment, pouring every penny back into the business. The breakthrough came when a regional bank chain signed us for their branch security overhaul after they experienced a minor data breach. Their testimonial opened doors to other financial institutions. By year 3, SecureNode had 32 employees and a downtown office. By year 5, we were the go-to security solution for businesses across the Pacific Northwest. Then came the acquisition offer from a national tech conglomerate, $28 million. After taxes and paying out my investors, I walked away with $11 million at the age of 31. Throughout these years, my relationship with my family remained complicated. My parents took pride in my success, but always seemed to view it as expected rather than exceptional. Darren, now 27, had cycled through jobs at breweries, restaurants, and retail stores, never keeping one longer than 6 months. My parents continued supporting him financially, explaining he was still finding his path. I maintained the peace by helping when asked. When Darren needed bail money after a DUI, I paid it. When my parents wanted to renovate their kitchen, I covered it. When Darren wanted to start a food truck business, I invested $50,000, even though his business plan was essentially non-existent. The food truck closed within 3 months. After the acquisition, I made a decision that I thought would secure my family legacy while protecting my own financial future. I placed $3 million in a family trust with structured access for my parents' retirement an eventual inheritance for both Darren and myself. I maintained control as trustee to ensure responsible management. The remaining $8 million I invested separately for my future. With my newfound wealth, I bought a beautiful house in West Hills with a view of Mount Hood. For the first time, I decided to host Thanksgiving, excited to welcome my family into my success. I spent weeks planning the perfect meal, hired a decorator for festive touches, and even arranged for a professional chef to assist with cooking to ensure everything would be perfect. I wanted my parents to see that all their sacrifices had been worth it. Little did I know that this Thanksgiving would change everything. The morning of Thanksgiving dawned clear and crisp. I woke up early, energized, despite the nerves. The chef arrived at 9 a.m. to start preparations while I handled last-minute details. I wanted everything perfect when my family arrived at 4 p.m. When the doorbell rang, I straightened my tie and took a deep breath. My mother entered first, kissing my cheek without warmth. My father followed with a firm handshake instead of his usual bear hug. Darren sauntered in last, giving me a smirk rather than the customary brotherly embrace. Something felt off, but I dismissed it as holiday tension. I gave them a tour of my new home, pointing out features I thought would impress them. The state-of-the-art security system, the home theater, the wine cellar. My mother nodded politely while my father remained stoic. Darren seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and smiling to himself. "Dinner is ready," I announced after champagne in the living room. We moved to the dining room, where a magnificent spread awaited. A heritage turkey, 3 different stuffings, roasted vegetables, fresh cranberry sauce, and 2 kinds of potatoes. Crystal glasses and fine china gleamed under the chandelier. We took our seats, and I raised my glass for a toast. To family and gratitude, I said, hoping to capture the essence of Thanksgiving. My parents clinked their glasses half-heartedly. Darren barely looked up from his plate. The conversation remained stilted through the appetizers and into the main course. I filled the awkward silences with updates about my company acquisition and future plans. Nobody asked follow-up questions. As dessert was being served, pumpkin pie with homemade whipped cream, my father cleared his throat. "Fidel, your mother and I have made a decision we need to discuss," he said, placing his napkin beside his barely touched pie. "We have decided that moving forward, you are no longer going to be included in our will or family inheritance." The words hit me like a physical blow. I placed my fork down slowly, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me. You have more than enough," my mother added, not meeting my eyes. "Darren will need the support more than you ever will. We need to be practical about these things." I looked at Darren, who was suddenly very interested in his pie, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I do not understand," I said carefully. "Is this about the trust? Because I set that up for all of us." "The trust is part of the issue," my father continued. "You are controlling our access to what should rightfully be family money. It shows how little you trust us." I set it up with financial advisors to protect everyone's interests, I explained, feeling dizzy. "To make sure there would be enough for your retirement, and we do not need you to manage our affairs," my mother interrupted. "We raised you, not the other way around." The conversation devolved quickly. Accusations flew about how I had changed since making money, how I was showing off with my house and my success, how I had always been selfish, even as a child. Darren finally spoke up, suggesting perhaps I should learn to share better, like we were children fighting over toys. "I think you should leave," I finally said, standing up. My hands were shaking. "This is my home, and I will not be insulted at my own table." "Typical," my father muttered as they gathered their things. "Always thinking about yourself." They left without thanking me for the meal. I stood in my beautiful empty dining room, surrounded by uneaten food and unwashed dishes, wondering what had just happened to my family. The next morning, still reeling from the disastrous Thanksgiving, I received a notification from my banking app about unusual activity. Logging in, I discovered a transfer of $1.8 million from the family trust account, a transfer I had never authorized. I called the bank immediately, heart pounding. They confirmed the transfer had been processed the previous day to an account belonging to Darren Cruz. The authorization appeared to have my electronic signature, but I had signed nothing. Hanging up with the bank, I immediately called my parents. My mother answered on the fourth ring. "We knew you would call," she said, sounding resigned rather than guilty. "There is no need for drama." "No need for drama. You stole almost $2 million from me." My voice cracked with disbelief. "We did not steal anything," my father said, now on the line. "That money was meant for family. We simply redirected it to where it was needed." Darren needed a $1.8 million handout for what? There was a pause before my mother answered. "He found a beautiful property, a lake house in Coeur d'Alene. He has always wanted to live near water. You bought him a lake house. With my money, I was shouting, now pacing my kitchen. With family money, my father corrected. You have plenty more. You can make another $20 million if you want." Darren has no such opportunities. Because he has never worked for anything in his life, the injustice burned in my chest. You have enabled him for years, and now you have committed fraud to continue doing it. "We are your parents," my mother said coldly. "We gave you life. We sacrificed everything to give you opportunities. If we decide your brother deserves this support, that is our right." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer. The weeks that followed were a blur of depression and betrayal. I spent Christmas alone, ignoring the few holiday cards that arrived. My appetite disappeared along with my sleep. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. In early January, I received an anonymous email. "Your parents have done this before," it read with an attached document. The sender identified themselves only as a former employee of my parents' tax preparer concerned about potential fraud. The attachment contained records of previous financial manipulations. College funds mysteriously emptied a small inheritance from my grandmother that never reached me. Loan applications with my name that I had never signed. This prompted me to dig deeper. I hired a forensic accountant who uncovered a pattern of identity theft dating back to my college years. My parents had opened credit cards in my name, taken out personal loans, and even filed fraudulent insurance claims. Most disturbing was the discovery that they had been siphoning small amounts from my business accounts during SecureNode's early days, when I had foolishly given them emergency access. The evidence pointed to a calculated long-term scheme. The Thanksgiving confrontation had not been a spontaneous decision, but the culmination of months of planning. They had likely already begun the process of transferring the trust funds before sitting down to eat the turkey I had so carefully prepared. With each new discovery, my heart hardened a little more. I sat in my attorney's office, staring at the stack of evidence we had compiled. Monica, my lawyer, waited patiently while I struggled with the decision before me. "If we file these charges, they could go to prison," she explained gently. "Identity theft, wire fraud, elder financial abuse, given your father's manipulation of your grandmother's will. These are serious felonies." "They are my parents," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "They stole over $2 million from you," Monica reminded me, "and systematically abused your trust for years. The statute of limitations has not expired on most of these crimes." I closed my eyes, remembering birthday parties, school graduations, chicken soup when I was sick. Then I remembered the cold dismissal at Thanksgiving, the calculated theft years of favoritism and manipulation. I need to talk to them one more time, I decided. The next day, I drove to their house unannounced. My mother answered the door in her gardening clothes, surprise quickly turning to wariness. "Fidel, we were wondering when you would come around." She did not invite me in. "I know everything," I said quietly. "The credit cards in college, grandmother's inheritance, the business accounts, everything." Her expression did not change, but she called for my father. He appeared behind her, arms crossed. So dramatic, he sighed. Always making mountains from molehills. Return the money, I said. Sell the lake house. Transfer everything back to the trust with a proper structure, and I will walk away. They exchanged glances. That is not possible, my mother said. The property is already in Darren's name. He has started renovations. Then I am sorry, I said, feeling oddly calm. I did not want this. Want what? My father's eyes narrowed. You will be hearing from the district attorney, I said, turning to leave. I suggest you find a good criminal defense attorney. You would send your own parents to jail. My mother's voice rose. Over money. Money you do not even need. I paused, looking back at them. This was never about money. This was about trust, and you broke that beyond repair. 2 weeks later, they were arrested at their home. The charges included identity theft, wire fraud, elder financial abuse, and grand larceny. Local news picked up the story. Successful entrepreneur defrauded by his own parents. I avoided reporters and kept the blinds drawn. Darren called me screaming the day after the arrests. He had discovered there was a lien against the lake house property. His renovations had halted. His bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. You destroyed our family over your precious money, he yelled through the phone. You always thought you were better than everyone. You were complicit in theft, I replied calmly. Return what you took, cooperate with investigators, and maybe you will avoid jail time. He hung up on me. 3 days later, he attempted to flee to Mexico with nearly $400,000 in cash. He was arrested at the border. The preliminary hearing was surreal. I sat in the courtroom watching my parents in matching orange jumpsuits, their faces drawn and angry. They pleaded not guilty, their attorney arguing that cultural differences about family financial obligations constituted a misunderstanding rather than criminal intent. The judge was unimpressed, especially after reviewing evidence that they had accessed my accounts using stolen passwords and forged documents. The fact that the victim is your son makes this more egregious, not less, she noted, setting bail at amounts they could not possibly afford. As the case proceeded, more victims emerged. 2 former business partners, a distant cousin, even our old neighbor, whose identity they had used to obtain a second mortgage. The prosecution's case grew stronger while my parents remained in county jail. Darren, facing less severe charges, accepted a plea deal. In exchange for testimony against our parents and full financial restitution, he would receive 5 years probation and community service. He agreed immediately. The trial lasted 8 days. I testified for nearly 6 hours, detailing the systematic abuse of trust and the elaborate steps my parents had taken to access my accounts. Their defense centered on their sacrifices as immigrants and their cultural belief that family resources belong to everyone. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge addressed my parents directly. The American dream you pursued does not include defrauding your children, she said. You exploited familial trust in the most fundamental way possible. This court sentences you each to 8 years in state prison, with possibility of parole after 5 years. Additionally, you are ordered to make full restitution to all victims. My father stared straight ahead. My mother wept silently. I felt nothing but exhaustion. The lake house was seized and sold at auction, recovering approximately $900,000. Another $600,000 was recovered from various accounts. The remaining money had been spent on luxury cars, expensive clothes, gambling debts, and Darren's failed ventures. I would never see most of it again, but that no longer mattered to me. I moved forward methodically. I established new financial protections, changed all my accounts, created a revocable trust with an independent trustee, and installed additional security systems in my home. I declined all interview requests and avoided social media. I focused on rebuilding my life without the people I had once called family. Unexpected support came from colleagues and even competitors in the tech industry. Many had experienced their own family difficulties after success. A small group of fellow entrepreneurs became my sounding board and social circle. My executive assistant Thomas became a close friend, inviting me to family dinners where nobody asked about my bank account or wanted anything from me. For the first time in my adult life, I was surrounded by people who valued me for myself, not what I could provide. The first letter arrived 6 months after sentencing. Written on prison stationery in my mother's neat handwriting, Fidel. We know you are still angry, but we are your parents. Family forgives. Everyone makes mistakes. We deserve a second chance. This place is terrible. Your father's health is declining. Is this really what you wanted? To see your parents suffer? Visit us. We need to talk. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the harm they had caused. Just expectations that I would forgive, because family forgives. I did not respond. The letters continued monthly. Each one emphasized their suffering, the poor conditions, how cruel I was to abandon them. Each one framed their actions as a minor indiscretion rather than calculated theft. Each one claimed entitlement to forgiveness without offering genuine remorse. After a year of these letters, I finally agreed to visit. The prison was 2 hours from Portland, a concrete complex surrounded by razor wire. I went through security checks and sat in a plastic chair waiting. They looked older. Prison had aged them beyond the single year. My father had lost weight, his shoulders hunched. My mother's hair had turned completely gray. For a moment, I felt a pang of the old love, the old loyalty. You came, my mother said, reaching for my hand across the table. I kept my hands in my lap. I came to listen, I said, if you have something new to say. We made a mistake, my father began. We got carried away trying to help your brother. You have to understand we saw you succeeding so well and him struggling. So you committed multiple felonies, I said flatly. We are your parents, my mother insisted. Everything we ever did was for our children. Sometimes parents make wrong choices out of love. This was not love, I replied. This was theft, manipulation, and favoritism that you chose to escalate into criminal behavior. So, self-righteous, my father muttered. You would keep your own parents in prison. You put yourselves here, I said, rising to leave. When you are ready to truly acknowledge what you did, maybe we can talk again. I did not visit again for another 6 months. Instead, I focused on healing. Weekly therapy sessions helped me process the betrayal and recognize the dysfunctional patterns that had shaped our family. I established new holiday traditions with friends. Thomas and his wife invited me for Christmas. My business mentor, Mark, included me in his family's Easter celebration. I channeled my experience into something constructive, creating a mentoring program for young tech entrepreneurs focused on both business development and personal financial protection. I shared my story as a cautionary tale without naming names. Warning signs, proper financial controls, the importance of independent advisors, these became my mission. Slowly, the sharp pain of betrayal dulled into a manageable ache. I could go days without thinking about what had happened. I started dating again. I even laughed sometimes without feeling guilty. 18 months after the trial, an unexpected letter arrived, not from the prison, but from a halfway house in Eastern Oregon. It was from Darren. I do not expect forgiveness, he wrote. I would not forgive me either. I am writing because, after mandatory counseling and a lot of time to think, I understand now how badly I hurt you. Not just taking the money, but years of jealousy and entitlement. I let mom and dad's favoritism warp me instead of becoming my own person. I am sorry, Fidel. Truly sorry. The letter continued detailing his therapy journey, his new job at a lumber yard, his small apartment paid for with honest work. No excuses, no expectations, just accountability and information. He ended by saying he would understand if I never contacted him again. I waited a month before responding with a brief email. Thank you for your letter. I appreciate your honesty. I am not ready for contact yet, but perhaps someday. His reply came the same day. I understand. The door is open whenever or if ever you are ready. No pressure. 6 months later, I agreed to meet him for coffee. We sat across from each other, two strangers with shared blood and shared trauma. He looked different, thinner, his face more serious, his designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a work shirt. "You look well," I offered. "I am getting there," he replied. "One day at a time, like they say in the programs." We talked for an hour about his job, about my business, about neutral topics like sports and movies. As we prepared to leave, he handed me an envelope. "It is not much," he said, "just my first repayment. I get paid next week, and there will be more." Inside was $300 cash. "Darren," I began. "Please," he interrupted. "I need to do this. Not because the court ordered it, but because I need to make this right, even if it takes the rest of my life." I nodded, respecting his need for atonement. We began meeting monthly. Small steps towards something that might someday resemble brotherhood. Our parents continued sending letters demanding forgiveness and second chances. The contrast between their entitled expectations and Darren's humble accountability spoke volumes. One accepted consequences. The others believed themselves exempt from them. 2 years into their sentences, I received notice of their first parole hearing. They expected me to speak on their behalf. After much reflection, I declined. They were denied parole. Through this journey, I learned painful but necessary truths. Trust must be earned continuously, not given blindly because of shared DNA. Boundaries are not cruelty, but self-preservation. Success reveals character, both in those who achieve it and those who orbit around it. Most importantly, I learned that family can be chosen. The friends who stood by me, who opened their homes and hearts without conditions, showed me what healthy relationships truly look like. They taught me that I deserved better than what I had accepted for so many years. I forgave my parents eventually, not for them, but for my own peace. Forgiveness did not mean restoration of relationship or trust. It meant releasing the anger that bound me to them, freeing myself to move forward without the weight of resentment. As for Darren, cautious hope replaced suspicion. His consistent efforts at amends opened the possibility of a relationship built on new foundations, one with honesty, respect, and appropriate boundaries. Some family ties are strengthened by crisis. Others are revealed as chains that must be broken. The choice to protect yourself is never selfish. It is necessary survival. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about toxic family relationships? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of overcoming family betrayal. Remember, sometimes the family we choose brings more healing than the family we are born into. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to establish healthy boundaries in your own relationships.